special guest who you can see is our pastor, Andrew Agnew, and you might be thinking, oh, we hear from him every week. What are you getting him on in episode 2? I want to hear from others. That's what Andrew said when I asked him as well. But I think there's good reasons to have Andrew on. It's really important to know your pastor, and I know he shares a little bit week by week in his talks, but I thought it'd be really good just to hear his story. I read a book which I think everybody should read. I think it's called The Book Every Pastor Wants You to Read, or something like that. I'll maybe put a link on at the end. And it just says it's really important to know your pastor. So yeah, we'll have a go at getting to know you a bit better this afternoon. So let's just get started, Andrew. Thanks for coming. Thanks for doing this. So yeah, let's just get started where you grew up, a little bit about your background and your introduction to church or Christianity.
Yeah, I'm a very typical Northern Irish person where I grew up with church was normal. Everybody was going to church. I was sent to Sunday school, local Presbyterian church, parents who would send me along. And so my introduction to Jesus was right at the beginning. I was born in 1972, so I was born right at the beginning of what's called the Troubles. So mixed in with that is what it is to be a Northern Irish kid growing up with some of the worst of what Northern Ireland saw during Troubles that time.
Yeah, I think I was in the news when I was growing up. It must. What are some of the things that really you remember about that strike you, that now looking back, and it might have been normal at the time, and now you think, what was that? Was ridiculous.
Do you know, it's such an easy question to answer, because we've talked to our kids as we go over to Northern Ireland and we let them experience what Northern Ireland is every summer with seeing grandparents. We talk about some of the things that we grew up with that now don't exist anymore. Like when you walked into a shop, you had to open up your backpack, open up your bag, and there would have been a security guard checking to see if there was anything, a gun or something in it. So that was normal. And I remember Carol even sharing about coming over to Edinburgh and walked into Wilkie's just on Princess Street and opened up her bag to the security guard, and the security guard looks at her and goes, "What are you doing?" And it was just so instilled into us that that's what you did.
It's incredible, and it's not that long ago.
Not at all. And also police and our army people walking around the roads with guns. I mean, I would go and visit friends when I was able to drive at 17. Going and visiting friends was a normal thing in a car, because everybody lived all over the place. Everybody bussed into school. But when you did that, if you got stopped, you always had to have your driver's license, because the army would stop you and ask you where you were going. Now, they probably were looking at my name and thought, yeah, they were able to check databases, whatever, and they knew that there was nothing wrong. But I had friends who were Catholics who would have been there, searched, everything opened up. Whereas, I would have told my friends who had gone to Catholic schools, oh goodness, we just sit and have a laugh for 15 minutes and then we drive on if there aren't any other cars. Such a different experience for us.
So your school was Protestant only, you say, with Catholic school?
Yeah, in Northern Ireland you do have the segregation, although every school is open to whoever wants to go to them. And so every school, it does carry with it, this traditionally is a school that Catholics would go to, this traditionally is a school that Protestants would go to, but Catholic schools teach Catholic religion in them, which meant that most Protestants wouldn't send their kids to that kind of a school.
So you had Catholic friends, which was fairly unusual?
Actually, yeah.
How did you make sense of that then, growing up?
Well, it was the example of my parents. My parents were part of a golf club in Dungannon town, and so they had friends that were from across the divide, if you want to call it that. And so we hung out with their kids. So really, we were never allowed to be disparaging against somebody from the other side of the community, and so that was really deeply instilled into me. So if anybody from primary school had said anything and I said, no, that's wrong, you shouldn't say that, then I was called a Fenian lover, which is like a really disparaging word for somebody from the Catholic tradition. So I think I was very aware growing up that I felt a real privilege to know people that other people didn't know, and almost to hang out. And I was part of an orchestra too on a Saturday morning, and most of my friends in the orchestra were from Catholic schools around the Newry area. And so it was, in a way, it was like a really cool other life, other friends that you could have that you just knew you were safe with and everything.
And I think that helps with kind of outlooks.
Totally.
When you move to different places as well, when you've had that. I think as a Christian, it can be quite odd sometimes looking at cultures like that. I kind of see a bit of similarities with southern states in America. You're very Christian places, like Northern Ireland was, and like southern states is, and there'll be other examples probably, the UK generations previously, when there's a lot of good things and it's a Christian country, but yet you see things that are so inherently wrong, really. How do you make sense of that?
Do you know, I think obviously growing up in a church, and I became a Christian, John, when I was pretty young. I know I've probably shared that in front of the church loads of time. I was about 9, 10, maybe 11 at the latest, but I do remember making a conscious choice to follow Jesus. So I think not knowing the deeper elements of our theology or Catholic theology, all I knew was they seemed to put far too much importance on Mary for my comfort. But apart from that, it seemed I wasn't quite sure what the big differences were. They followed the Pope and we didn't follow the Pope, and they did confession to a priest, but we didn't. We just did confession straight to Jesus. So in a way, I wasn't quite sure of all the major differences between us growing up. But at the same time, they were people, and they were people that I just knew. These are my friends, and I just felt that privilege of knowing people that were very different from me or would have different experiences from me. I was really glad of that. I'm not quite sure how else to answer that question, because making sense of it was I hated the killing.
So the only thing, I'm just thinking, because I grew up in Glasgow until I was 10, and you had the Rangers Celtic thing. And I guess it's just odd that because they didn't seem like they were Christians, but they used Christianity as a total excuse. And I ended up supporting Rangers. But then I almost grew embarrassed by that. I didn't want people to think I was a Rangers fan. I'm a Protestant, so I'm a Rangers fan, or vice versa. And it's just, and I guess it's similar. You're almost embarrassed.
I hated it. I really hated it.
And it takes it away from the real message of the gospel.
Well, exactly.
And so I think that's just, but then when you know people from North, so you kind of have that vision of almost negative views of Protestant Christianity in Northern Ireland from what you see in the news. But then when you actually meet people from Northern Ireland, it's so far away from what it's portrayed. You see people who are real, love people, love the gospel, love Jesus, and you just don't know how it gets to where it gets.
Well, I think it's because you had to fight against what was being instilled into you. So at home, it was very easy for me to just love everybody. But at school, it was harder because, like, say, for example, you would go into school and somebody in the year above you, somebody from your year, their dad had been killed by the IRA because they were army reservists. So you constantly confronted, or there was a bomb, I remember walking up to the gate to pick up milk. I remember walking up to the gate to pick up milk. It was about maybe 9 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening. A bomb goes off, or I'm leaving the empties up to the gate. A bomb goes off. And the noise is like of nothing I've ever heard. I sprint down to the house, and of course, within half an hour, the news is an update that there's been a bomb in my hometown. And my bomb was the most bombed town outside of Belfast. So a lot of tension in the town I grew up. So I think it was constantly having to fight against what was kind of culturally being instilled into you, hatred and fear.
So you've got all that going on, but you're in a great church. And so just tell us a little bit about how you came to faith.
I had it shown to me in the lives, the faces and the speech of people in the church. I had Sunday school teachers who it was so obvious they loved Jesus. When they sang about it, when they talked about it in children's church, in Sunday school, and not just one Sunday school class. I mean, I can't pinpoint one teacher, just so many different teachers that on a Sunday morning, they smiled. They just told us all of these amazing things. We sang songs, we had just joy. That was amazing. Then when I took communion, my minister, I had to have an interview with my minister. And I remember I just loved listening to him. He just loved the youth of the church. He wanted us to be not just dressing with shirts and ties, because that's how we all did go to church. He was like, oh no, wear those cool shorts to church, Andrew, this Sunday. I want to see people's faces. And he was trying to move the church out of the very traditional mold that it had. But there was just a real fun and realistic attitude. And then we started having assistant ministers, and they just were so on fire for gospel and for Jesus. And they started youth groups where they really started inputting into us and encouraging us to serve. And so actually I just feel that for a church in just any old normal town in Northern Ireland, God was really moving and really, really giving us opportunities to learn and to grow and serve. So it was good. And then of course in school, in our senior scripture union in school in 5th and 6th year, we maybe had 40 or 50 kids. And then in intermediate school, SU, which I led when I was in 6th year, we probably had about 50 kids. And then in junior SU, you probably had about 70 kids. It was so normal.
A big part of every part of your life.
Massive part. And so you had friends that were in different churches all over the place. And denominations were quite, you kind of felt as though we're better than you. And the denominational thing was a bit of a nonsense. But actually, you just had good friends. And so you went to the youth group in the church that was just really good. And so for a time, it was my church. For a time, it was the Church of Ireland. For the time, it was the Methodist. Great leaders all over the place. There was no excuse to not really actually think, Jesus is worth following. And here's a group of people who love to follow Jesus. Let's learn. Yeah. It was easy. Yeah. Easy.
But it's great to have that environment where, at that age, where you can learn, where you can see other people's faith.
Totally.
It's really important, and I think we've seen from other people's testimonies in our church how important that is.
Yeah.
Real enthusiastic faith. So you've got that, and then you leave Northern Ireland. Things change. Tell us what happened. Where did you go?
I went to New Zealand for a year. I got a scholarship from our school to take a gap year and finish my A-levels. I had a guaranteed place to study in London after that. Took a gap year, went to New Zealand. There were 2 of us from our school went, and in the school that we went to in Auckland in New Zealand, there were 4 of us from the UK who were boarding tutors. So we helped with boarding duties, and we also helped in the PE department and helped with the 1st and 2nd years in the school. Okay. There were no primary, it was all secondary school. So we were really busy while we were out there. 4 kids heading away to the other side of the world. You don't have your massive support structure of school and Christian friends. You're writing letters because the internet doesn't exist, and email doesn't exist, and phone calls cost a fortune. And so you're writing letters constantly to friends at home. You are trying to discover a new life for yourself. You've got a year, and you want to make friends, but it's a very different culture in New Zealand. It's nowhere near the Christian culture of Northern Ireland. So I tried going to church. I would go Sundays without going to church, and so I really drifted. And of course, within the group that I was with, all these young people, all kind of left school, all university or running jobs and working in the school, just fell in with the crowd of what they were doing and kind of went along with that.
Probably nice, good people.
But just stupid mistakes, doing things that I look back and really wish that I'd never done, messing around with drink and parties, just stupid things. And God really taught me a lesson while I was there, because I had drifted so far away from church, and you hardly ever opened my Bible. I brought my Bible with me, the Bible really knows with me, but hardly ever opening up a Bible. I've been traveling around South Island during the Christmas holidays, where they have 2 months. That's their summer holidays, of course, in the Southern Hemisphere. Traveling around. I'm on a bus heading from this month of traveling by myself back up to Auckland. There's a girl sitting beside me in the bus, and she's reading the Bible. And she's about the same age as me, I guessed. And I'm looking at her and thinking, I feel so rebuked. And I just said, I can't believe you're reading the Bible. And she says, why? Do you read the Bible? And I said, I'm a Christian, and I've really fallen away. I really feel terrible. And she's like, well, have you found a church? No, I haven't settled on one. I've tried a couple, but you don't know people. It's hard to make friends, and there aren't as many young people, and excuse. And she said, I'll really pray for you that you find a place. And so she did. And she was back visiting about a month later, and she said, let's meet up. Have you found a church? No, I haven't found a church. And she's like, listen, let's pray. While we were praying, this sounds all really good. It's not going to be a good thing. We're praying. Somebody walks up to us and says, hi, I'm a Christian. I just wanted to share my faith with you. We're no way, we're just praying that I would find a church. Oh, I'd love you to come along to my church. Well, it was a cult.
See, it's a cult.
It's a cult. How do I know it's a cult? Because I'm invited along to Bible study after Bible study. During these Bible studies, they ask me all these questions about what the Bible means. I'm answering it all. They're going, yeah, well, it doesn't mean you're a Christian, though. And it was when they started saying the church you went to is not Christian. You think that you're a Christian, but you're not Christian. Unless you're baptized in our church, you're not a Christian. So we are going to set you a task now that if you have to come to every Bible study this week, everything we invite you to this week, and at the end of this week, we're going to baptize you, and then you're a Christian, and then you're part of our church. And it was called the International Church of Jesus Christ, and it was the most frightening thing, just thinking, this is wrong. They can't say that people that I've known aren't Christians just because it's not their church. Yeah. So I went to a teacher in the school who went to a Presbyterian church in New Zealand, a good church, but it was way the other end of the city where it was really impossible for me to go to. And I said to him, I'm in a pickle and I don't know what to do, and I really feel like I've let God down here, but this is what's happened. He phoned up a friend who ran a Christian radio station in Auckland who said, get him out now. He is in such danger. They will remove him from the school. They will heavy shepherd him. They will manipulate his life. You've got to get him away. So he was like, Andrew, you've got to cut ties with these people. You've got to phone them and say you're not going to see them anymore. I'm afraid you're in real danger. So I made this phone call where I had people shouting down the phone at me saying the devil's got you, and oh my goodness, we knew this would happen, and if you don't keep going then the devil's got you and you're just the devil's child. I'm 18 years old. I've never cried as much in my whole life. So that was really tough because I didn't have a close Christian friend. I mean, yeah, there was that teacher in the school who'd helped me, but that was alone, without my support network. Couldn't tell anybody at home, couldn't tell my parents, couldn't tell my friends that were there because they were just like, what on earth is the matter with you? That was tough. And I came back from New Zealand rebuked. I went to a local church while I was there that had some youth, and it was a little open brethren church, and they were great. They were really helpful, but it was a year off. Okay, I can't wait to get away and get back to Northern Ireland. And I mean, I love New Zealand, it's a gorgeous country, but couldn't wait for a Christian family.
I can imagine.
Tough.
So you came back to the summer, and then you went.
Came back and then went and studied architecture. It was okay. Didn't really love it. Really wanted to be an actor. I was going to All Souls Langham Place, and it just felt it was a good, brilliant church, amazing teaching, phenomenal music. I mean, it was the most fantastic place to be, but just felt like, look, I'm studying something that I'm not really passionate about. I want to act. And it was my brother had come to Edinburgh. He was studying physiotherapy. He dropped out of his first university course, changed course. I was studying architecture, dropped out. He's in Edinburgh saying, come to Edinburgh, there's a drama school here, it's called Queen Margaret College. I found a brilliant church, I've become a Christian. Just come. And my brother, well, I did. My brother and I weren't amazingly close, but we became not just brothers, but like best friends during that time. And I came up here, went to a church here called Carrubbers. Everybody knows it, and the living knows of Carrubbers. And I just found a Christian community that I could really get involved with, where I really grew, where it was just so confirming to me of where I'd come from and how God moves. And just, I felt like it was a jigsaw puzzle where I had lots of bits. But in Carrubbers, they taught through a Bible book by book, and they taught themes, and all of a sudden the jigsaw made more sense. It was just filling in the gaps of my childhood teaching.
So do you think that's, I know you love doctrine, you like reading different views. Do you think that's where it really, your interest sparked? Or do you think it was New Zealand where you're like, wait a minute, I need to get this myself sorted out here?
No, because it wasn't until I got to Carrubbers that I realised that people could have different views on the same things and yet still be really good Christian brothers and sisters and go to the same church. Whereas in Northern Ireland, no, if you disagree, then you go to a different church. Carrubbers, it was like, no, you think that, I think this, but actually that's not a big issue. The big issue is the gospel. The big issue is how you get saved. The big issue is what the Bible is. The big issue is God. Okay, whether Jesus is going to return then or then, okay, whether God created the world this way or that way, okay. Whether, it wasn't such a major
You
thing.
do, and I was going to speak about this later, but we might as well speak about it now. Doctrine, you have a real interest in it.
Totally.
you know what, having discussions with you, you know all the different views. One of your biggest skills, I don't know if you'll take this as a compliment, but I think it's a biggest skill. You're very strong on the gospel.
Yeah.
You don't move. There's no. You're very. It is what it is. No compromise. But other doctrines, which people might argue about, I could name a few. You're very careful about not pinning yourself to one. Is that fair?
It might be, although I do have.
Is that deliberate?
No. This is really hard to answer. I think it's because my respect for people who have done doctorates and who lecture in different Bible colleges and seminaries. They're so convinced by the way that they've interpreted the Bible to be, and I want to find out more. And yet there are times when I feel, but I love this person and I see their point, but I see this and I feel that that's more faithful and true, but I don't want to diss this person because they've added so much to what Christianity is in this world. And so I think there are certain topics that I've avoided in church. And
we're potentially going to come up
in
one in Thessalonians, aren't we?
But
Yeah.
before Christmas we'll be dealing with one that it's Jesus coming again, and it's timings, and we've just got to go for it, and also we've got to I think we've got to remain open that there are certain things that are just really hard to understand.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that Peter, in 2 Peter, he's writing to Christians who are dispersed all over the place. This is a letter that's going to be read out all over the place, and he even says there are things that Paul writes in the scriptures that are hard to understand.
Yeah.
Well, praise the Lord. There's an apostle, somebody who's led the church, saying, you know what, there are things that are just really hard to understand. And I was reading it just in a quiet time this morning about head coverings. Listen, let me tell you, that's so hard, because I'm reading it going, I know what I've been taught, and yet I see brilliant Christian people who've come to a different conclusion, and I love them. But you know what? It doesn't affect whether we can have fellowship, and so I might walk carefully.
No, and I think it's really admirable, and I think we are in a church like Crubbers, I guess. We have people from all different backgrounds and views, probably. Yeah. And I think,
you love doctrine.
I love doctrine, but I do love doctrine. I'm not as well read as you. I probably stick to one particular viewpoint, so I need to read a bit more widely. But it's tough. Maybe in time. Yeah. Maybe we can have proper debates rather than just me telling you what I think. Okay, so where were we? You've come to Crubbers.
Yeah.
But you're acting as well.
I am.
Acting must be, to me, it would seem very difficult. There's a lot of, it's about yourself, self-promotion. Yeah. It was really competitive.
Totally.
How did you? But at the same time, your Christian walk, you're much closer to God than you've been.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Right. Well, that's where we actually drama school was very good for this, because drama school was already telling us, look, you have values, and you should be able as an actor to say no to things. So say you are really politically active, then you're not going to do an advert or something that is going to help a cause that you don't believe in. So actually we're instilling that into us. So it was very easy for me as a Christian to go, yeah, well, I'm not going to do something that's going to involve a sex scene, or I'm not going to do something that's going to involve me swearing my head off and doing something. But we can sanitize these things so much, and eventually, I did a show where I had to murder somebody, shoot them every day. I had to shoot this person. It was called The Great Gatsby, and I had to shoot Gatsby every day in a show. Like, that's not good, Okay, well, I'm not swearing, I don't have a sex scene, but I'm shooting somebody and killing them. It's so hard to know how to do that. And actually, I did struggle over time thinking, should I be doing this? If I'm packing my bags and if I'm following jobs around everywhere, am I selling my soul? And then, eventually it was just, I was in London, I was doing a show in Hampstead, the New End Theatre in Hampstead, which is a traditional fringe venue of London. It's not the West End, it's kind of the next tier down. Doing a show there, it was my big opportunity to invite agents along, and I did, and I had all these agents coming along. I had lots of good offers from agents.
What was the show?
It's Great Gatsby.
Okay,
Great Gatsby. Yeah, which, considering there are car chases, you think, how on earth can you do a stage show on the Great Gatsby? It is brilliant. Yeah. I had agents. I'm phoning my brother. I'm telling my brother all these things that are happening. My brother turns around. My best friend, my brother turns around, and he says, Andrew, do you talk about Jesus anymore? Because all you seem to do is talk about you and agents. It was a knife to my heart that I knew I needed. I loved my brother even more for daring to tell me the truth. I was turning into a monster that was just consumed with how well I was doing and what opportunities were opening up for me. And I knew I had to get out because I knew that all I was going to do was deteriorate. I wasn't going to handle this well. It was about me. Yeah, God. And I was going on to a great church, I had great friends at East London Tabernacle, a kind of a Baptist church in Mile End in London. So I just knew at that moment I needed out. I knew that God had allowed me to look and have a wee go at things, but it was just unfulfilling. And actually, I knew that what I wanted to do was to do what God wanted me to do. So I was like, right, I need to get away from London, I need to get back up to Edinburgh, back up to Carrubbers, back up to good folks, friends. Every time I was in trouble, Edinburgh were people I was contacted first. It was like, yeah, I need to get back up there. God, you got me where you want me. And actually, I haven't mentioned this when I was talking about being at Dungannon Presbyterian Church, but when we prayed for missionaries, I would be like, no way, no, God, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be a missionary for you. Because I just even knew way back then what God was calling me to that. And it's such a strange thing that I suppressed for so long. Back up to Edinburgh, back up to Carrubbers, meet Carol. Carol and I end up spending all this time together because of Bob Ferguson, who's now deceased. He'd become a Christian, and I wanted to kind of catch his fire. And all of a sudden, I'm in Carrubbers. I'm doing a conversion course to get a degree so that I can apply to teaching college. I get accepted for teaching college, and I'm here. I'm in Edinburgh again. I'm training to be a teacher, but I'm still thinking, yeah, but it's not because I want to be a teacher, it's because I want to go and be a missionary. Maybe this will be useful. And Carol and I marry, and lo and behold, this Bob Ferguson says, do you know, there's a girls' come to share about Mexico and street kids. I think that the pair of you should lead a team. So we did, and we led a team over to Mexico. We were 6 months married. We chose a team, took them over to Mexico for a month. We worked with a chap in Mexico. We took night classes to try to learn Spanish. There was the girl who had shared at Carrubbers, who used to go to Carrubbers. She was our translator. And yeah, God just totally showed us, yeah, this is what I want you to do. I want you to help this work. So we come back over, we're working, I'm still teaching, Carol's working for the blood transfusion service. We're always thinking, how can we get back over? God opens the door. While we're in Mexico, we meet this guy from OMS, One Mission Society. He's from Northern Ireland. Carol's parents support him as a missionary in the church. We go to visit his work. He says, I'm wanting to do a work with street kids. I'd love to meet the guy that you're working with. Keep in touch. We do. 3 years later, we're applying to go with them and start a work with street kids with OMS in Mexico City. We had brushed up on our Spanish. We continued to take lessons in faith that God would open up a door one day.
Did you speak Spanish at all before?
Never learned it at school. Never learned it at school. No, it was just to go to Mexico, and we just loved it. Yeah. And while we were there, we had to take lessons as well, but we just flew with the stuff we so enjoyed it. And because we had to speak Spanish every day, because nobody spoke English, so you just had to speak in Spanish, and that was tough. But that was us in Mexico. We were there. You
worked with street kids
on and off for 6 years. Yeah,
it's gonna be hard going.
It was tough because the thing is, working with street kids, it sounds. I mean, I think if I were to interview about your life, I would be so interested in what you're doing, and that sounds so amazing. You've lived here, you've lived there, you've lived everywhere. You've had all these experiences. It sounds so glamorous. It's just what you do in the moment. And so being in Mexico, everyone thinks so romantic. Wow, living in a foreign country, speaking Spanish, gorgeous, cactuses and tequila and sombreros. And no, we're living in one of the biggest cities in the whole world, working with drug addict street children who are like secondary school age and older. It's tough because they're dying, because they're drug addicts, and because their motor skills are affected, and we're taking kids to hospital, and we're trying to play football with them, and I'm no football player, just to try to get them down off the drugs for a while, and then share something from the Bible with them, bring them food. You're dirty, you're catching skin infections, you're breathing the stuff that they're doing drugs in front of you. It's tough work.
And you're probably seeing some positivity, you see some positive steps, and actually with addictions, it's back to square one, and that's got to be deflating as well.
Totally. And so what we were really convinced of out there was we needed not just to visit them on the streets, but to have a centre where they could come and experience so much more time away from the streets, and help to sort out which ones really were desperate to get away from the streets and which ones were just playing us for food.
And quite humbling as well, because in the West we can almost get success and we think we've done it, whereas there maybe you don't get the level of success, and it'd be good to rely on God.
Well, I mean, totally, we had to rely on God, because I remember as a missionary, Corruber's phoning us up and saying, what do you do about this, that and next thing? And we said, look, we just pray and we just trust, and we just open the Bible up and see what God says to us. We're not trained counsellors, we're not trained drug people, we're not trained bereavement people. We just have to get on with what God's called us to do. But we had brilliant Mexican brothers and sisters, some of whom are still working away with the street kids, and we support them as a church. They were our examples, because we spoke really good Spanish, John, but we didn't get all the innuendo. We didn't get all the cultural references. There was so much stuff that we just didn't get. They did, and still they loved. And that was such an example for us, because we were constantly learning, but they loved even in spite of the foul language that sometimes we didn't pick up on. And they were amazing, and that was a great thing. So our success, if you could call it, from the drop-in centre was about 40% of kids who came to the drop-in centre regularly started to leave the streets and get jobs, and we were helping to pay for digs.
That'll be much higher than other.
Well, it was, because usually if you're trying to get them straight into a home, when they leave the streets, they're leaving a family that they've created with other kids. And so to leave all of that behind, to have rules, regulations, you wash, you get up at this time, you do this, you do your chores, you do your schoolwork. I mean, they last a week and then they're running away back to the streets. Whereas the drop-in centre helped us to really see, look, who means it? Who's sick of street life? Who hates it enough to want to get rid of it? And so that was a good way. I think the drop-in centre's been a great tool.
And did you link with churches there, or how did that work?
There was a denomination, OMS had founded a denomination out there, and so we were able to go around lots of different churches there in order to be able to tell them about the work. Not everybody was interested, because some of them were 2 hours in a bus away from where the drop-in centre was. Not everybody had a car. A lot of people were riding public transport. So it was a smaller team, some of volunteers and some who were paid staff.
Okay. Wow. So, amazing. And you started your family out there as well?
We did while we were there. Carol got pregnant, we came back, had Tabitha, lived in Northern Ireland for a wee while to help we'd gone for a year to test the waters. Yeah. It was confirmed to us while we were there. That's why we went to see, look, is God got this? Is this something we've manufactured? Does God want us to do? And he made it so obvious that it was what he wanted us there to be part of that work. So came back, had Tabitha, went back over. Oscar was born out there, and then so we were there for about 6 years on and off.
It's a long time.
Yeah, and it was tough because we were sick a lot. Lots of toilet trouble. Typically living in a
country.
Like
the food though?
Oh, the food was amazing, and the people were incredible, and they love their food and they love their families. And as Northern Irish people, we felt very at home there, even though it was desperately dangerous. And we brushed so close to the people being kidnapped, and I mean it's a dangerous place to be.
And because a lot of the street kids, they're dealers themselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
So some of the guys who are kind of lording it over them, did you have trouble from them
as
well?
No, actually never. And the odd time when people come over to like, what are you doing with these kids? And we're like, look, they're here of their own volition. We're not forcing anybody. We're not holding a gun to anybody. They can be here if they want to. But actually now it's more than ever. Mexico City has always been a dangerous city. Now it's becoming more and more dangerous. A lot of the drugs were up north and down in Acapulco, but now actually it's coming into the city more and more, and it's a huge prayer point for the drop-in centre is the danger of other people trying to come in to threaten, because the street kids are being used more and more. Not so much years ago when we were there, but much more now. Yeah.
And the work's still going?
It's still going, and actually I'm part of a board of directors for the work too, so it's great to still be in touch, and it's great to still be able to help even from a distance, because giving money and praying is great, but actually being able to, like, we went out to visit and just let the kids see what they grew up with.
It's quite good to have somebody from inside knowledge but out the situation as well.
Hopefully that they don't see this foreign interference.
Exactly. So that was Mexico. That was 6 years. Spot the difference. We've decided to broadcast Andrew's interview in 2 parts, so that's all for today. So apologies for the technical issues. Probably need an upgrade on the technology. We are just using a phone. But thanks very much for tuning in, and come back next week for a second part of Andrew's story. Thank you. Bye.